Welcome to the 2022 Lean Higher and Education Conference. Thank you for all attending today's session, which is what happens at a Lean HE conference doesn't have to stay at the Lean HE conference. Continuing the conversation through a community of practice. And this will be run as a learning session. My name is Sally Cattell and I'm one of the co-hosts or moderators for this session. Before we kick off though, I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander traditional owners of the unceded land on which we work and learn. We pay respect to the elders past and present and the place of Indigenous knowledge in the Academy. I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And just some quick housekeeping items before we start. Please stay on mute during the presentation. However, you're most welcome to turn on your camera so that we can see you. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand. And also please note that the session is being recorded. Now, I'd like to hand over or introduce our presenters for this session. It's our honour today to welcome Brent Hurley, Professor Bill Balzer, Dr. Tammi, Sinha, and Lejla Brouwer-Hadzialic. So over to you.
Well, hello everyone, welcome. It's great to see all your happy faces here. There's actually quite a lot of you I recognise, so I suppose I need to kind of resist the temptation to sort of do my usual and just start chatting, but maybe later on we'll have time for questions at the end. So firstly, thanks very much to Lean HE and in particular to the University of Melbourne and Pirate TV for a really kind of energetic start to the conference. It's certainly something that I needed at 5 AM this morning. And thanks to our workshop host for the welcome. Thanks to all of you for joining our session. My name is Brent, I'm from Edinburgh, Napier in the UK, and I'm delighted to be co-presenting alongside Tammi from the University of Southampton, also in the UK, Lejla from New Engineers and UPD in the Netherlands, and Bill from Bowling Green State University, all the way across the Atlantic at, I think it's 2:45 AM, so Bill's had a late night stroke early morning. So throughout the session, please feel free to use the chat, to ask questions, to make any comments. If we don't pick them up during the session itself, we'll certainly do so at the end. We're going to talk for maybe about half an hour, and then we'll have 15 minutes just to kind of chat and discuss things. So without further delay, I'll hand you over to Bill, who's going to tell us how it all began.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. Brent, if you could advance the slides. Great. So, yeah, that's perfect. So about 1.5 COVID years ago, which seems like an eternity, John Hogg invited me to present a keynote address at last year's conference at the University of Strathclyde. So John wanted something, the word I remember was provocative. So always the people pleaser, I shared with him that we were using Hoshin-Kanri, or Lean Strategy, Development, Deployment, and Management at Bowling Green State University, but I hadn't found a lot of it being used in higher education, which really puzzled me because it was certainly a significant application of Lean. So we agreed that Hoshin-Kanri, Hoshin, which is strategic policy direction, and Kanri, which is strategic policy control, might be a provocative topic at last year's conference. So I began my talk, and Brent, if you'll maybe go to the next slide, please. I began my talk by describing the current state of Hoshin-Kanri in higher education thinking. So, why better strategy deployment using Hoshin-Kanri was needed in general, but in higher education in particular, showing that Hoshin-Kanri fit naturally within the principles, practices, and tools of Lean higher education. So there was significant overlap there. I described the limited state of practice of Hoshin-Kanri in higher education, but also some early evidence of benefits, and then discussed the potential root causes for the limited advocacy or practice of Hoshin-Kanri in higher education. You go to the next slide, please, Brent. I ended my talk by challenging the Lean higher education community to do more. Higher education would benefit from good strategy development, deployment, and management. And Hoshin Kanri, built on our lean pillars of continuous improvement and respect for people, was recognized as an effective approach for strategic planning, just not as much in higher education. It was shown to work in higher education, and that lean practitioners and researchers could add great value to their own institutions by promoting and implementing Hoshin Kanri. So based on comments posted in the chat, it appeared to be provocative and seemed to have hit a nerve, and I'm going to turn it over to Brent.
Yeah, so as you can see in the slide, there was a number of comments in the chat, and to be honest, this is probably a small excerpt from kind of, it feels like there was sort of 70 or 80 comments. It was just continuous. It was hard to keep up. And I was one of the people that posted the comment. So the comment I made is highlighted in yellow. I think I posted several comments. So I guess there was three main things going through my head during Bill's presentation. Firstly, I felt Bill was picking up a new ground at a Lean HA conference. Bill sort of touched on this already, just with John saying do something provocative. So I hadn't really heard about sort of kind of anything about strategy deployment at conferences before. It tends to be around more sort of process improvement type activities. Secondly, as part of the strategy hub team at Edinburgh Napier University with responsibilities around kind of strategy implementation approaches, I could see that although we weren't using Hoshin Kanri by name, I recognised a lot of what Bill was describing as being sort of analogous to our university's approach. And I actually felt kind of reassured that we were doing things in quite a good way with quite a good structure in place. Our strategy kind of lives and breathes in the university. It's not something that sort of sits on the shelf, which I think is one of the things that Bill described during this session. But thirdly, I recognised really an opportunity to learn from others and really to add to our knowledge and to kind of connect with other people that are doing sort of strategy deployment approaches across other higher education institutes. And I suppose this was a really important point for me. I could see there was like a lot of energy in the chat, and I basically sort of wanted to be involved. So I chipped in my comments alongside others that were suggesting we needed to get together for further discussion. And this was all met with a really high level of enthusiasm. So after the conference, I was sort of literally on the edge of my seat waiting for an email, thinking someone will be in touch soon. So I didn't get an email straight away, but it was a Saturday, the conference finished on a Friday, and then it was a Sunday. So I thought, well, it's the weekend, so I'll definitely hear from somebody the following week. And then on Monday, I sort of checked to see if somebody had set up a meeting, but there wasn't anything. And then it kind of got to the middle of the week, and I was a bit disappointed that nothing was happening. And then it sort of struck me that I realised the somebody I was waiting for was actually me. So I looked back on the chat from Bill's session. I really made a note of everyone that showed even the kind of slightest interest in taking the conversation further. And I sent them all an email. And some of them in turn then forwarded on this email to other people and other kind of colleagues, either at other universities or within their own institutes. And that was really the beginning of the group. And I suppose for me personally, this is the kind of main point I want to emphasize, particularly at this kind of early stage of the conference. But if you kind of take one thing away from me, it would be to really encourage people to kind of reach out if you see something of interest, if you see a colleague talking about something you'd like to get involved in or find out more about, and just really reach out and contact them. What I've kind of found since joining the Lean HA community is that it doesn't really recognise like hierarchies of grade or experience or anything like that. I think there's been 10 conferences so far, but whether this is your 10th or your first, people will really want to hear from you. So just kind of reach out and connect with people, just drop them an email, drop them a note in the chat. So kind of back to our story. So I think, our session is really not about necessarily Hoshin Kanri, it's about communities of practice. And communities of practice are thinking about this sort of great situation where kind of work ceases to become work anymore. It's something that's just kind of fun to do. And I think that's what a community of practice is really all about. So this is our group, sort of look at all these kind of happy faces, all very delighted to be part of the community of practice. And there's a few others. And here is a slide of the groups that are based on location. So what you can kind of see is we're primarily based in sort of North America, Europe really. And I guess one of the things that's interesting for me is when we meet, it feels like I'm meeting for people all across the globe. The Netherlands feels like a really long way from Scotland. But when I actually was putting a slide together for the presentation and I look at the map, we are actually quite close. So, it's not that far away compared to the kind of vastness of the world. And I suppose, if this makes us reflect that actually, if there is people in other universities in other parts of the world that want to join us, then please do. But also, there's kind of lots of opportunities to kind of join people from other parts of the globe and kind of really connect together. So what do we do? So how did we establish who everyone was and what the group was doing? Well, when you're remote working, you can't sort of get together in a room with kind of post-its and kind of have a coffee like you normally would when you're getting to know people and sort of develop ways of working. So we had to use technology, and we decided to use a Miro board. And Tammy's going to tell us a little bit more about that and how we've been working together.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Brent. And also a huge thank you for getting us all started on this. One of the things I've just put in the meeting chat is, what has been your if not me, who moment, or if not now, when moment? So we all have those. And one of the things that I've found over the last few years with a pandemic is that as an academic, it was really interesting how we suddenly had to flip from our face-to-face sessions, working with our students and our colleagues, to being online. And I think sometimes being forced to change can be really, really innovative, can be really, it's like the crucible of change, isn't it, that we have to do it. And we didn't discuss is this the right way? We just had to do it. So one of the things that we found when Brent sent out the brilliant email about who's interested in Hoshinkanri and policy deployment in HE, we started this really great group of people who've now turned into a network and also a community of practice. So one thing that I'd like you to do, please, is just type in the meeting chat. What do you understand of that term, a community of practice? What does that mean to you? So let's see what comes up while I'm talking through. Miro was one of our enablers for being able to work across the globe together. And I'm a Lego serious play gal. And what I try and do is bring that into my workshops, my teaching, my research as much as I can. But actually that's harder to do when we're working on this type of platform. But some of the key principles that really helped us was to think about, well, how do we get into flow? How do we tell our stories? How do we make our stories together so that we can learn from each other? And are using metaphors, thinking about, well, what's the glass half full or half empty for you? How do we construct knowledge? So how do we construct knowledge as our community of practice? And then coming back to how do we link our creativity? How can we be courageous, competent, creative, and also credible in the work that we're doing? So one of the things that really struck me is Miro was our enabler, but we were working in this way where we were really connecting with each other, really challenging each other, and also trying to move on the body of knowledge around Hoshinkanri policy deployment. Brilliant, Brent. Next slide, please. I sound like Chris Whitty. So when we think about evolution, we started off as a conference community of practice. And one thing I love about Global Lean HE is that we're a family. We've been together for about 10, 12 years. We've grown up together in the discipline. We share, we challenge, we look at all of the things that are working well and all the things that aren't working well. And I think we're very honest with each other. So when we're working in this way, it takes a while to build up trust. And I think that's really key. It takes a while for us to be able to tell our stories, warts and all, to say, well, actually, this is working really brilliantly in my team, my organization, but actually this really isn't. And that's how we learn together. That's how we sort of stretch that body of knowledge. Great stuff. Thanks. Next slide, please. So coming back to Miro as an enabler, could I just ask, please, in the chat, whether you use Miro or Mural or another board online as an enabler for working with your teams wherever they can be? Brilliant, thank you. So quite a lot of people use Miro, which is really, really great. So Miro and Trello, thanks, Karen, great stuff. So there are lots of tools out there, and I have to admit, I really like Miro. I think it's basically an infinite whiteboard, but what is really great with Miro is that we have all of these different tools and these templates that are already set up that we can use as lean practitioners. So what you can see here is a snapshot of our Miro board that we used as our enabler to bring together this group of people who became a network, who became a community of practice, exploring this space of policy deployment, Hoshinkanri. So what you can see on here is that we are using this as a way of introducing ourselves to each other, of sharing information, sharing knowledge, sharing diagrams, sharing techniques, thinking about, well, what is the vision for our group? Why are we here? What are some of the issues that we're trying to address together? And one of the things that's been really, really heartening from this is that we've started to really stretch that body of knowledge, which I think is so important. Great stuff. Next slide, please. So what you can see is we started off by asking our friends, our colleagues, our new friends to just let us know where people were from, their department, their background, and anything else that they wanted to share. So I've purposefully just done a snapshot here. You can't see it, but it's really helpful, isn't it, when you're working with people that some people you know really well, some people you don't, and it's a way of creating that sense of community. And one thing I love about the University of Melbourne approach is that we are acknowledging and really appreciating the elders that we have on the land that we're in and the land that's hosting. And I think that's important as well within our Lean HE community of practice. We really appreciate our elders and the wisdom that they share with us so honestly and openly and with a huge amount of compassion to help each other. Great. Next slide, please. So when we started to build our community, we were really focusing on how do we then develop the knowledge base that we have and how do we share that. So as you can see from this slide, we were starting to think about our vision for why were we going to spend time building this community and nurturing this community. So some of the things that we were looking at here was how do we help our own universities and other universities be better at delivering strategic aims in a challenging external environment. One of the themes that we're really looking at is we're in a VUCA world, aren't we? Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. How can we navigate our way through that so that we're successful, whatever that means? So in our very first session together, we had a brainstorm and we started to think about, well, what does that mean? What does Hoshin Kanri actually mean to us? How are we linking strategic aims, mission to actually what happens on the ground within our teams? How do we set true north? And then how do we share that within our organization? So we talked about the A3X matrix, we talked about catchball, plan, do, check, act, all of these different things. But then that was underpinned by really good stories, really good case studies to show what's worked and what hasn't. Brilliant. Next slide, please.
And then we come to this. Thank you, Tammi, for sharing how we organized ourselves around this topic of Hoshin Kanri. As Tammi told you, we were really curious within our community of practice, how we do things, sharing that. And somewhere in March this year, we got even more curious about, are there any others doing the same thing, but not being able to share it with us? So we started conducting this short online survey on the use of Hoshin Kanri tools and practices during strategy deployment and strategy development, actually, and deployment in higher education. We struggled ourselves, so we thought maybe there will be some more university that who struggle with this as well. Our aim was to collect as much as possible on this topic, to make a summary of our findings and to share it with a larger community, Lean higher education community. So I would like to let you know what we have up till now. Brent, can we? Yeah, thank you very much. Brent showed you in a previous slide where the people from our community of practice are coming from. And that's also where our survey responses are coming from. It's mostly the northern part of the United States and the northern part of the Europe. To our call for the survey, we got only 18 responses. and knowing that our community, Lean HE community, is much bigger than these 80 surveys, I would really like to call you to action when I'm done with my story, and hopefully you will provide us with some more insights on this topic. Brent? And just a few things that we can share right now with you, just a few small things, but really interesting things. One of the questions in our survey was, what was the reason for starting or using Hoshin Kanri? And what we see from those 18 responses, that most of the universities are in search of how to focus, how to organize themselves more in a focused way, and not doing everything, but doing a few good things, and how to know what are those few good important things for the future. And another one that we saw is, Brent, please, the next one, is that on our question, how long are you already doing this Hoshin Kanri, or how long are you trying to connect the strategy with your improvement initiatives? We see that only a few, I think only 1 out of 18 is doing this for more than 5 years. And there is a small group that is doing it somewhere in between 2 and 5 years. And most of us are just starting with this. So that's in line with what Bill was talking about, that it's really questioning us why. What is it that that there is in this Hoshin Kanri approach that we just started with it while we are thinking that this is such a good stuff that can help us do more and better things within our universities with Lean. So this tastes for more, and I would really like to ask you to help us collect even more input on this survey. I will put the link to the survey and to informed consent in the chat, and would love to have your responses so that we can really get some meaningful insights and can research a little bit more and give you some good findings and as help for your journey, your Hoshin Kanri journey within your university. So back to Brent, I think. Or no, Tammi, sorry.
Hi, thank you, Lejla. One of the things that has emerged from our lovely, brilliant community of practice is a book that we are pulling together. And we have a fantastic team of colleagues who are contributing. Bill and I are the co-editors, and we have decided to take quite an interesting approach to this book. We're using a lot of the Lean tools and principles and continuous improvement and respect for people at the very heart of it, and having sprints to work with our contributors to do that. So we've had a couple of sprints already. We've actually got another one today. So if any of the lovely people on the call are joining us, we look forward to that. So this is a book that is in progress, and it's around Hoshin Kanri in higher education, a guide to strategy development and deployment. So we have 4 sections to our book. Section 1 looking at introducing Hoshin Kanri for those who may not be familiar with the approach. Section 2 is telling all of the wonderful stories that we have with our institutions around the world of examples of HK in HE. In section 3, we'll be looking at how we can expand that, how we can really stretch the boundaries, stretch this idea of the body of knowledge further, to inspire colleagues at different universities to adopt the approach and really see where it can take us. And then finally, we'll be thinking about implications for research and practice. So we have very tight timescales, but we are really looking forward to sharing this book with you all, and hoping it will be an inspiration to you to adopt this approach. And as you can see, that we have from our community of practice many contributors. So Luke, Graham, Karen, Brent, Ellen, Irene, Lejla, Karen and Jose as well, who are maybe on the call. And you can see from the variety of titles, the different types of universities that we're working with as well on this. And what we've heard so far, what we've seen so far, is the richness of what's happening within universities, what's working well, what's not working well. And we're very excited about the project. And this is what can happen when, like Brent, you suddenly email everyone and say, well, if not me, who? Let's get something started and let's really start to think about how we can work together. So at this conference, if you see anything or hear anything or feel anything that's really inspirational, then be that person to send the email and say, who would like to get involved on this project? It's that point of entry, isn't it? It's sowing that seed and seeing where it lands, seeing where it grows. So some of the takeaways and lessons that we've learned is that when we connect with colleagues, it's fantastic. Take the initiative. There's nothing to lose and there's a huge amount to gain. So reach out with questions and ideas. And if you want to, and if it feels right, start community of practice. So I've had the sort of the joy of being part of a few communities of practice that have been around for over 10 years. And a community of practice is not just a group of people. It's a group of people who are really passionate about their discipline, who want to meet every 6 weeks. So there's a rhythm, there's a purpose, there's a mission, and there is trust that's been built. There's huge amounts of sharing of knowledge and tools and whatever is going to help. So we have a purpose, we have outputs, we nurture each other, we have a rhythm, and most important is it needs to be fun. We need to get into flow. So colleagues, are there anything else that you'd like to add to our takeaway and lessons learned?
Well, I would like to add just a small thing, the last one, but not least important, that how do we make it more accessible? We live in different time zones, so you have to take that into consideration. And from what you have seen, a lot of our colleagues in this community of practice are from English-speaking countries, and some of us are from not English-speaking countries. So that makes it not always very easy to attend, or the threshold may be a little bit higher for us coming from non-English-speaking countries. But use your technology, use each other in a positive way to help each other. Make the community feel good about everything is possible, everything is okay. There is this level of trust that you need, and that to feel comfortable. So just go for it. Nothing is crazy, and share your experience and knowledge.
And I might add that the setting up the community of practice created a real cadence for us for the work that we did. So when we were meet on, maybe it wasn't maybe about a monthly basis or 6-week basis, we had homework, or some of us had homework to do. We brought it back to the group, so it created some really external goals and accountability for keeping projects moving along. So they didn't get sort of buried in the in basket. They just kept going forward. So I really appreciated that, and the outstanding input. When you think you have a perspective on things, but when you hear from all these different people, around the world who are thinking about Hoshinkanri, it really helps you develop your own thinking.
So shall we check if there are any questions to answer about our community?
I think we have a couple. Yeah, great.
There was one question in the chat from Peter Willoughby from RMIT. He said, were you all at the same place in your lean journey when you started collaborating?
Not at all.
Yeah, I think the slide that Lejla put up, which showed, one uni was had been doing it for 5 or more years, a small group, 2 to 5 years, and a lot less than 1 year or less. And there were others who weren't doing it yet, but were very interested in it. So I think we really came across a very wide spectrum of experience.
Yeah, just
And
to kind of add to
really
that.
nice. Oh, sorry, Brent.
Oh, sorry, on you go.
Okay, it's really nice to have this recognition of your journey and to get some help from those who are just a few steps in front of you, and makes you feel a little bit more relaxed in what you are doing, and that some mistakes are just there to make them.
Yeah, I was just going to add, we're quite a mixture of different colleagues. So some of us are academics, some of us are working kind of professional services area, working the strategy hub. So we're kind of working all different types of departments, and obviously all different kind of universities and cultures. And I suppose coming back to Lejla's point about the survey, actually, so some people are maybe doing Hosh and Canry on a sort of institutional university-wide level. Some people are maybe just looking to implement something at a departmental level. And I guess, I don't want to overpitch the survey, but we're looking to hear from people, I guess, that are doing it in all different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case that you're responsible for a university-wide strategy. You might just be looking to improve things just within your own small area. So that's kind of quite nice. We've got a whole different mixture of people trying to do different things.
Yeah, just to add to that, we're all at a different place in this journey. We're all at different levels of maturity. And actually, that's what makes it brilliant, because there are no daft questions. We're able to share with each other what we're doing, where we are, what we know, what we don't know. And part of developing that community of practice approach is really having that level of trust so that we're able to ask those questions. There's so much I don't know. There's a huge amount of things that I've tried that haven't worked. There's a few things that have worked really well. And I think as long as we can share that, it's really rich and it's really joyful to work this way. Just a quick question for people on the call actually is, how many of you have a community of practice within your own institution? And how many of you are part of communities of practice that cross institutions, but also cross sectors? I think there's a huge amount to say around sharing these different things. So the intersection of perhaps working within higher education and healthcare and manufacturing, especially as lean practitioners, we know that lean has evolved over time. And we know that context is really important, that the language that we use is really important. So I've just joined an IT department, so I'm learning a huge amount around the three-letter acronyms that go within that discipline. And it's really interesting that, when we have our lean hats on, how do we describe it? What sort of things do we think are important? How do we listen to people? And part of our community of practice in HK has really helped us to do that, I think.
There is an interesting comment from Ellen. She says that this community of practice is really pushing us forward in our journey to implement Hosh and Canry in our institution. And that's really true. Every time when we meet each other, there is this impulse to do a little bit more, or just to go further. And that's a nice thing, nice side effect from being a part of this community of practice. It helps you make your steps as well. Thank you, Ellen, for sharing this.
So there was a comment from Michael saying, is a community of 5 a team and is a team of 45 a community? So I'm just with my academic head on, I've just put in the meeting chat a definition from Etienne Wenger, who is sort of the father of the whole community of practice idea. And his definition is that it's a group of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. That's quite hard to say. So you've been up since 5 o'clock. But really, a community of practice is different to a team or a network or a group of people. And for me, it's all about the passion that we have, the domain that we're looking at, and then the practice that we bring from that. So thank you, Eric. Yes, intersection of HK, lean practice and performance, that could be part of what we're doing within our community of practice. So a community of practice can evolve naturally, but it can also end naturally. And part of the thing that is important is, how do you keep that passion alive for your discipline? How do you share what you want to share and actually sometimes share what you don't, because that's how we learn, that's how we grow, and that's how our practice improves.
Eric Olson also raised the question, which I think is a really good one. What is the minimum level of practice to say you're doing Hoshin Kanri? And Eric, that is one of the ongoing challenges, not only for me at least, one of the ongoing challenges for Hoshin Kanri as well as lean in general. So how much lean principles, practices, and tools do you need and activities do you need to do to say, yes, I am doing lean? And I think that sort of the same question would be as for Hoshin Kanri. From my own perspective, I think when you start to see at least the balance of doing some things that align with our mission of continuous improvement, or the pillar of continuous improvement, and doing other things that are aligning with the pillar of respect for people, which is the foundation of lean, then I think you can start to say you're sort of in the ballpark of doing Hoshin Kanri. Whether it's one catchball experience, using the catchball experience, that's your respect for people. Everybody's important. Everybody contributes. And an X matrix, which is a continuous improvement tool. Then you can start to say, yeah, that's starting to smell like Hoshin Kanri, feel like Hoshin Kanri. So I guess it's Hoshin Kanri. But a really good question, Eric. Thanks for asking it. I don't know if others have something they'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I suppose we often have debates about terminology, particularly in the sort of context of lean. Like we say business improvement, somebody else says continuous improvement, somebody else says lean. So I guess it comes into that context. Like when I attended your session last year, Bill, I recognised a lot of what we were doing as being Hoshin Kanri, but I'd never really heard the term before in any great detail. So I think, sort of personally don't try and get too sort of bogged down on the terminology, and it's more like about the what we're doing.
And for me, it doesn't matter really how big you go within the institution. The moment that you try to connect the strategy with operation and do it in using this Hoshin Kanri tools, we can talk about Hoshin Kanri then. So even if it's very small.
So Peter has just put in a question. How long has this been going? How many have joined, left, joined again? So this began with Brent sending out the email. Brent, when did that happen?
Yeah, so that happened just immediately after the conference last year. And I just looked back actually this morning just to remind myself when it did happen. So the first email went to 8 people. And then these people then forwarded it on to a few other people. So I think we had up to 17 people at one point. A couple of people have left higher education to kind of go out with the sector and have left. And, there's a few people that kind of initially joined, but haven't necessarily been as sort of actively involved, and more sort of observers, just kind of interested in what's going on. But I think, it's probably a core of about a dozen people have kind of continued to meet regularly. And I suppose the initial meetings were kind of really establishing, what's the vision, what we're looking to do. And I guess Tammi and Bill instigating the book, that's really become the focal point. And that's really the thing we've been kind of talking about and kind of focused on over the last few months, and probably will continue to do so. And, I guess we'll sort of pick up in a bit more detail on the kind of wider work. But, the book's a great thing. It's a chance for people to kind of reflect on what they're doing, contribute chapters, think about their own kind of case studies and things like that. So that's really the focal point of the group just now.
And I think Michael wants to join us.
I was going to say, if anyone would like to join, that is so cool. That would be amazing.
And we are still open.
Jean put a comment. Oh, sorry. You go, Tammi.
I was just going to say, with a community of practice, it tends to have a core of people who drive it, who nurture it, who look after it, who keep it going. But then you have people who dip in and out, and that's absolutely fine, because sometimes you've got time and space for it, and sometimes you just haven't. That's just what I wanted to add about people coming in and coming out of a community of practice. Thank you.
So if you want to join, maybe it's a good thing to send Brent an email or us an email or leave a comment here.
I can't see the chat just now because I've got too many things on my screen, but I'll have a look. And if anybody says they want to join, then we'll just send us your email or leave your email or get in touch.
There was another question from Jean. She said, there is a well-known saying in business, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Any thoughts on that?
I'm happy to answer that. Absolutely. You're right. So thinking about what culture is, it's the way that we do things around here. And if you want to change a culture in an organization, it can take years and years and years. And this is where you can start to think about with Haudenosaunee, for example, we're looking at top down and bottom up, and we want to really look at engagement of colleagues. So respect for people, the heart of lean. When you're working in this way, you want to ensure that your strategies are aligned, that people know how they're contributing. And there's that story of Kennedy asking a cleaner at NASA, what do you do here? And he says, well, I'm helping to put somebody on the moon. And I think we've all heard that story, but it's really important, isn't it? Because that's how you inspire people to be engaged in what you're doing, no matter what your role is within the university. So if we can all have that story of what our mission and vision is, and using Haudenosaunee to link that to all of our teams and what we're doing, I think it has huge potential. But Jean, you're absolutely right. That means that our culture needs to be open and honest, and we need to be able to take risks. I know sometimes we talk about ask for forgiveness rather than permission sometimes. What's the risk appetite within your organization? But there's a lot we can learn from the sort of the management literature as well within lean, and things like positive organizational psychology. I have a PhD student who's looking at that as part of her PhD and coming up with some amazing things. So don't be constrained by anything. Be curious, go and explore, and do good stuff.
And I might just add to that too. I think it's a great question. I might say leadership eats strategy for breakfast, because I think there are some practices that take place in institutions. I'll focus on higher education, where culture and leadership are probably primary. They really have a direct impact on whatever you're trying to do in that organization. But I think there's just lots of practices that also have an impact on whether Haudenosaunee, and it has to do with decision-making practices. It has to do with reward and recognition systems. It has to do with communication practice. They all play a role in shaping what people in an organization choose to do. How we get people to do their job. It's all these institutional practices aligned to get people to do their jobs the way we want them to do it. That's how nuclear power plants, generally don't, have explosions, is because we've got really good institutional practices. So while culture is important and would have an impact on whether you're going to have strategy, I think there are lots of other things that can nibble away at strategy, if not eat it. So great question, Jean. Thanks for raising it.
We do have one final question in the chat, maybe before we wrap up, just from Peter, around what the time commitment is that you provide to the community practice, and is it built into your work?
I could answer that. The time commitment is whatever you want to put in. I think, it's like, it comes back to Tammi's point earlier and various other points, that being part of a community practice is a voluntary thing. It's not a kind of requirement in any way. So people commit what they want to commit.
I think it's outside of our formal roles. But it's sort of like a fun and exciting thing to do. So we do it.